The cathedral service was always going to be the headline, but it was what happened later that night, behind closed doors at one of Dublin's most storied music venues, that those who were there are now calling the truly powerful send-off. Following Glen Hansard's funeral at St. Patrick's Cathedral on Tuesday, August 4, his family, closest friends, and dozens of fellow musicians gathered at Vickar Street in Dublin for a private celebration of his life. Held the way those closest to him said he would have wanted it, through music. The gathering came after Hansard's coffin had been lifted into a horse-drawn carriage outside the cathedral and carried off to a private family ceremony, applause ringing through Dublin's streets as it departed. Vickar Street itself carried its own significance for the occasion. The venue had hosted Glen Hansard and Friends performances for years, including a night in November 2016 when Hansard led a tribute concert there for his late friend and fellow musician Mike Christopher. Returning to that same room to celebrate Hansard's own life brought his story full circle in a way few other venues in Dublin could have. By all accounts, the night was an emotional one, filled with memories, laughter, tears, and songs shared by artists from vastly different corners of the music world, all brought together by the love and respect they held for Hansard. Performers included O Maonlai, Clemons, Mundy, surviving members of the Frames, Declan O'Rourke, Imelda May, and Bronagh Gallagher, among many others who took turns on stage throughout the evening. One moment in particular has already become the night's defining image. Eddie Vedder led a powerful rendition of Neil Young's Rockin' in the Free World, joined on stage by the sprawling cast of musicians who'd gathered for the occasion. At the side of the stage, Olivia Vedder, Eddie's daughter, stood hand-in-hand with Marketa Erglova throughout the performance, a quiet detail that captured the web of friendships Hansard had built and maintained across generations and genres over his career. The choice of songs throughout the night carried deep personal meaning. At one point the group performed Society, a song that took on added weight given Vedder and Hansard's shared musical history. The two had previously collaborated in 2013 on a studio recording of Bruce Springsteen's Drive All Night alongside Clemons, a track originally released on The River. That earlier collaboration, born from what those close to the trio described as a shared musical soul, made returning to a similarly intimate performance at Hansard's own send-off feel like the closing of a circle rather than simply another tribute. The night's most human moment came during that same performance, when Vedder, overcome with emotion, briefly forgot the lyrics partway through and softly whispered into the microphone, "Glenn, help me," a single unscripted line that left much of the room in tears. Elsewhere in the evening, Hansard's brother Gary led the crowd through a rendition of the Auld Triangle, the old Dublin folk song that had also closed out portions of the earlier funeral service, giving the night's most communal sing-along moment a direct thread back to the cathedral service just hours earlier. The Vicar Street gathering followed a funeral that had already drawn an extraordinary outpouring of grief and celebrity attendance. Inside St. Patrick's Cathedral earlier that day, Hansard's younger brother Richard told the congregation that Glenn had been an artist, a musician, an activist, and what he called the glue that held so many disparate groups together. His widow, Finnish poet Mare Saritsa, thanked the Gardaí and emergency services for the humanity they'd shown her in her most desperate hour, and thanked her late husband for the life they'd shared searching for beauty and truth side by side, saying that beauty had been found in their son, Christy, who was too young to attend but whose bright spirit, she said, he'd inherited directly from his father. Hansard's older brother Gary also addressed the cathedral directly, saying the family was absolutely blown away, humbled, and thankful for the incredible amount of love, honor, and dignity shown to his brother by people across Ireland and around the world, repeating his thanks 3 times over before stepping back from the lectern. Taken together, the two events, a cathedral service attended by presidents, poets, and rock royalty, followed by a private, music-filled night among family and friends at Vickar Street, offered 2 very different but equally fitting versions of a goodbye. One belonged to the public figure whose Oscar-winning songwriting had touched millions of strangers. The other belonged to the people who'd actually known him, trading songs deep into the night in the kind of room Hansard had spent his whole career trying to fill with exactly that feeling. For those who were there, the Vickar Street afters may end up being remembered as the more powerful of the two, not despite being smaller and less public, but because of it. A room full of people who loved him, doing the one thing they knew he'd have wanted most, picking up instruments and simply playing together one more time. The scale of who showed up to both events, from U2's Bono and The Edge to Pearl Jam's Eddie Vedder, from poet Brendan O'Beaglich to Hollywood-adjacent figures who'd crossed paths with Hansard over a 4-decade career, reflected just how far his reach had traveled from his origins as a teenage busker on Grafton Street. At the Cathedral, Bono had shared a voicemail Patti Smith left him after hearing of Hansard's death, explaining that she wasn't able to attend but wanted her voice in the room regardless, before he and The Edge performed Beautiful Day alongside Combe Mac Con Iamere, Joseph Doyle and Michael Buckley. That same instinct to make sure Hansard's send-off included as many voices from his life as possible, carried directly into the Vicar Street gathering later that night. Where the cathedral service had structure, hymns and formal eulogies, Vickar Street offered something closer to the atmosphere of one of Hansard's own gigs. Musicians trading verses, songs shifting unpredictably from one performer to the next, and a crowd that functioned less as an audience and more as an extension of the band on stage. Exactly the dynamic Hansard had spent his career trying to create every time he picked up a guitar. By the time the night wound down, those in attendance described an evening that had moved through nearly every emotion a room can hold: grief, humor, nostalgia, and finally something closer to celebration, as the group worked through songs that spanned Hansard's decades in music, from his earliest days with the Frames to the collaborations and friendships he'd built in the years since. It was, several attendees agreed, exactly the kind of night Hansard himself would have wanted to be at, if only he could have been there to lead it.